This episode of the DDK Show is brought to you by EliteJewels.com, your one-stop shop for fantasy esports. Pick your favorite players, earn points, and perhaps you can earn some prizes as well. Over $100,000 has already been won. You can use the code JEWELS, that's DUELS, when you deposit and earn your first $5 free. You must be 18 years or older.
Just even in my life, I tried to just do everything the most efficient way possible.
Because the key now is like you've got to that level, and that's awesome. Let's keep you here.
In Counter-Strike, so many of the things are in the timing, right? Sometimes 1 second is way too much.
Because I feel like some of my persona in Counter-Strike changed who I was as a person.
What? Jumping double for gold!
Hello, ladies and gents. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Stewie2k. I'm very thankful that he was able to muster an hour of his time in his very busy schedule to sit down and talk with me. And we had a great chat. We spoke about performance. You guys know I love to talk about performance. And of course, we also spoke about his history, some of his time in Cloud9, what he thinks about Cloud9 these days, MIBR, what he learns as a player moving throughout his career. And we have the fan questions at the end as well. And of course, a lot of extra tidbits here and there. So without further ado, please enjoy my interview with the lovely Stewie2k. Stewie, thank you for giving me some of your time. I know that you've been traveling a lot lately, and it sounds like you've been suffering from some jet lag. So tell me how it is kind of coming back from Copenhagen. Your thoughts on the event and also just dealing with the jet lag.
I came back just a week ago, but I've been jet lagged Copenhagen. I woke up at 6 a.m. every day over there, so it's kind of rough. But the tournament itself, there's many things we could have done better. I think we definitely could have made it to the finals, even after losing to Astralis, but we threw the game against NIP, and that was a tournament run there. But overall, there's mistakes that's easily fixed.
So when it comes to, because we mentioned jet lag there, and you guys are traveling to so many different tournaments. Obviously, there's always this idea of burnout, and I'm sure that must be something that you guys have talked about internally. But how you kind of can manage that as a team, as players. Is it something that you're very kind of conscious of, and if so, how do you manage it?
We don't really have a plan for jet lag. We just depends on the time we arrive to the tournament. And for Copenhagen, we landed early in the afternoon, so it's kind of hard for us to stay up. But some of us would take a nap and make sure we stay up till like 12, 1 a.m. so we can get a good night. But I don't really usually have a plan like that. But in terms of our schedule, we try to limit our tournaments, but make it as productive as possible as well, and attend the tournaments that a bigger tournament, but at the same time, it could be a part of the Grand Slam, like the big events, the events that we prioritize that actually matters more to us. And we try to go to less events that we feel aren't worth going, that can affect our schedule and our practice.
Gotcha. I mean, that makes sense. But do you get, obviously, you're used to traveling. You've been traveling for quite some years now, playing professionally. Is it something though where sometimes it's difficult to have a consistent approach whereby you can do X, Y, and Z things in X, Y, and Z order, and then every time you're good to go? Do you just go to an event sometimes, like let's say you travel to China or whatever? Is it something that's just random that you can have like a day or two that's just really awful strictly because of just feeling kind of off because of that jet lag, because of the traveling, the fatigue? Or have you found a more consistent way to generally deal with it?
I don't know about my teammates, but I know my teammates are pretty organized, especially Leash. He makes sure his schedule is always organized. He wants to know how his day is going to be ran. And, I trust in the guys to do what it takes for them to show up for the match. But personally, it depends on the match time. So if the match was starting at 12 p.m., I would try to get a good 8 hours of sleep or enough sleep to make me feel energized and mentally ready. And I would wake up a few hours before and do what it takes for me to wake up, like whether it's going to the gym, getting breakfast, or getting some coffee and be awake for a couple hours before the match just to get my body running.
And it's cool that you mentioned Elish. Obviously, I did a podcast with him not too long ago. So, and I want to touch on some of the, some similar topics. We can even just dive straight into some of the work that you guys have been doing with your sports psychologist. Elish obviously speaks very highly of him, and how has your relationship been with the TeamLiquid sports psychologist?
Yeah, so Jared's our psychologist, but when I first joined Liquid and throughout my career, I never really believed in working around a psychologist for my individual improvements. I'm the type of guy who likes to experience those problems and find my own solution through that. And for me, that's like a way of growing up as well. So I don't want someone there holding my hand or giving me guidance when I feel like I want to experience that. So, but we don't have an unhealthy relationship. Everything's still pretty neutral. I still go to him when I see problems within the team where I feel like I need more help to solve or a way to talk to someone. I'll let him know my thoughts and maybe he can convey my message to the next guy. But overall, I don't really talk to him unless the team wants to talk to him. Like I'm open to doing it with the team.
And when you said, problems within the team, is this kind of just you talking about, you want to take something in one direction, but you're not quite sure how to bridge that communication to your teammates, or is that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Or it could be, a problem that I don't know how to bring up to an individual and I feel like it's a very delicate situation, so I want to approach it very cautiously. So I might go to him and ask for his thoughts on my approach, or maybe he could do it for me.
That's awesome. I actually love that. That's I think not enough teams have that. And I feel like so many teams are probably broken up because so one thing after another, if it's not addressed slowly but surely, eventually people start resenting each other. So that sounds like a pretty healthy thing that you have there in the team in terms of that. And speaking of sort of figuring out everything by yourself, obviously it would make sense that you're a very very critical and introspective person, and obviously you have you're a professional player, you have very high standards for yourself. So like, how would you describe your weaknesses or the things that you're working on at the moment in your game?
And my individual performance isn't the best it can be right now, but I know it takes a toll on my team, and I might miss frags that are very crucial or impactful in the round. But that's on me to get my skill back up and get it consistent. But for me, there's a lot of different factors that lead to that. Like it can be so many problems that are happening that I can't be prioritizing that first. Like it's a team game and we got to solve the bigger issue. But at the same time, like I still have to pick up the slack and work harder and put in more time in the game to get my individual performance more consistent. But as a player for myself, I think my main issue is just having a higher tolerance of dealing with problems and consistently doing my role for the team and sacrificing some things from myself to get to the team. And I feel like my tolerance for that is pretty low nowadays after the player break. So I'm not doing the best I can for my team.
Is there an issue when it comes to dealing with these things you've mentioned because you have a lack of time? Like if you had more time, let's say, less tournaments to go to, would it be easier to solve?
Yeah, I think actually if we had more time, it'd be a little easier to solve just because, things like these problems are very delicate and it's very sensitive that you can't really rush the process. So right now we don't have that much time before our next three tournaments. So there's so many problems that are happening that we get kind of flustered, like we don't know where to begin. So it's getting kind of hard for us right now.
And you mentioned, of course, like one of the things that for you that's suffering is your individual level. I think most people historically know you to have this really crazy individual ceiling to your skill and a very aggressive play style and so on. Is it partly the nature of your play style, or is it what would you say is the reason, or some of the reasons that you're having the main struggle with your individual performance right now? Because obviously, before the player break, all of you are like just hitting absolutely everything.
The first thing is that, I don't have the same self-confidence in myself that I had during the run that we had during the Grand Slam. And that goes for all of us too. The five of us aren't playing at the same level that we should be playing at or we know that we can play at. And sometimes you just don't know why your skill falls down. Sometimes it's not really your aim. It could be your positioning. It could be other factors that make you uncomfortable during that round. So sometimes it's hard to say if it's really your skill. But as for me, I know my skill. Like I'm not hitting the shots that I should be hitting, and at the same time, there are actually a lot of unfair fights that I've been taking or put into as well. So it gets a little hard for me there. But I don't know. There's not much to say. I think it's just all about grinding it back and get your muscle memory straight and consistent.
Yeah, so let's say you're in a game and there's been like 2 or 3 rounds where you feel like you've missed a shot that you're set up to take, or you feel like you've not gotten the kill that you feel like you would normally have. Like, how do you, after that moment happens, are you kind of doing anything to kind of just remind yourself it doesn't matter, it's fine, or how do you kind of respond to that in the game, like a mental reset or something like that? How do you think about it?
It's actually funny because if you were to rewind time and go back to our run during the Grand Slam, if we miss easy shots like that, I'm pretty sure every individual would just think that it happens, and the next time the situation happens again, you most likely won't miss a shot, and you just move on from there. But nowadays, when things are going south for us and it's going wrong, personally speaking, for myself, I think if I miss those shots nowadays, it doesn't get me all flustered, but it takes a toll on my gameplay because that's a shot that I need to hit. That's a shot that is very crucial that could change around, and it might make me second guess myself the next round whether I should make this play that I want to do or not. And if I really do trust in my aim like that.
Yeah, it sounds like kind of a momentum type thing. I've seen this with a lot of top teams, and back in my Quake days, I've even experienced it to a certain degree as well. Like, it seems so much easier to deal with those moments if you've already just, let's say you've won the last like couple months of tournaments. Like, the inner narrative is that you're just the best already, or that you're just, doesn't really matter that this a shitty situation has happened, because you just know that you're going to find a way out of it. But let's say, if you're in like a slump or something, it feels so bad for stuff to go wrong because you just don't want to be in a slump anymore. It's like it validates the fact that you are in a slump. It's like that's sometimes like how I perceive that. Do you think there's anything to that? Just like you guys need to get more momentum.
Well, just looking at Liquid by itself, I feel like a lot of NA teams, including like Cloud9, back when I was on Cloud9, we were all very momentum-based teams. And myself as a player as well, I realized if I start off the game pretty strong, I'm most likely to have a good game. But the chances of me having a really good game if I don't start off strong is slimmer than, the other way around. So like you can look at it as a team perspective as well. When you're winning games, a lot of the mistakes are excused, the little mistakes that matter, or some things just get excused easier because you won. When you lose, everything gets more specific. You think about every little mistake, you point out every little thing. So it's kind of like that for an individual player as well, probably if they're in a slump, that if they miss a shot, they get so critical with their aim that it just makes them think more. They're more in their own head. Their confidence is just not going to be there yet. So I picture it the same way.
Gotcha. Yeah, just like overcompensating.
Yeah.
Do you think that actually there are issues where, let's say, like a bunch of the players on the team, maybe even like 4 out of 5 players on the team, everyone's kind of playing well, like in good spirits, in a good place mentally. But if there's like one guy that's kind of prone to tilting, is that going to be critically damaging for the team? Do you think if just one guy starts tilting, or do you think it's pretty easy to bounce back from that? Or does it have to be that every player is just in a good mental space for you to perform your best?
Like as for myself,
Yeah, like your experience with, let's say, because for me, I've had experiences where even if a player is like extremely good, I will maybe want to cut him from a team if he's just tilting all the time, or it just
yeah.
if he's exhibiting negative behaviors that kind of bleed onto everybody else.
Yeah, actually, it depends on the type of anger they're in. Sometimes it's just passion, sometimes it's just a part of the competition, and some people just react that way, and that's who they are, and you have to accept it. But it really depends on the individual. If they get frustrated or angry or whatever it is, if they bounce back the next round, if they can fully mentally reset, move on, like as if nothing happened. Like keep the environment strong, atmosphere good, and it's funny because on Liquid, when I first joined, they told me that they have mental issues and confidence issues. Like those were their biggest problems. Like they get mental barriers like playing against Astralis, right? Like all last year, and like that hurts their confidence too. So they're trying to also be really critical about the environment and how people react, whether it's negative, toxic, or whatever it is. But the funny thing is, when I first joined, I realized that some people are forcing themselves to really not speak if they get in that state of mind. But for me, I'd rather have someone get mad and show that than get quiet because that can affect the environment pretty bad. It could lower the communication. So I told them that it's okay for people to rage as long as it's not to point blame and you mentally reset the next round and you know that you're raging because it's just who you are. You know, it's part of the game and you're not raging at someone else or putting yourself down or holding your team back for the next round.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because those emotions are happening, so they're going to go somewhere. Either they're going to be bottled up, which is usually much worse than just exhibiting it, expressing it, accepting it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's definitely an unhealthy way to do it,
Yep.
but like bottling it up. So I definitely like that approach. And one word that you mentioned, by the way, when we're talking about performance, is you mentioned the word consistency, and this is obviously, I think, the thing that every pro player thinks about pretty frequently. If you have an amazing performance, you feel like, okay, well, I'm always, if I can do it once, how can I get myself to be able to do it every single time?
Mhm.
And we had this quote from Simple ages ago that people like to reference, where he was talking about consistency, and he said very simply, "Oh, I just have to play 100% in every single game that you play." And there's a few different ways to interpret that, but how do you sort of think about consistency and so on?
It's kind of hard for me to explain as well, just because I'm not consistent anymore, and I'm trying to find that consistency too. But I think within a team game, especially nowadays, the competition is just so high now that you know any team in the tournament can actually beat any team, and there's always a threat now. There's always this thought that this team, you have to take them serious. You just give them no chances. Don't even give them that feeling of thinking about if they can win or not. Like they have a chance to win. You don't want them to think that at all. So, but in terms of consistency, it's kind of hard to say. I think inside a team game, like if you look at a player like Elige nowadays, I think he's very consistent this year, and he's becoming one of the best players in the world. But that's because he works very hard. His work ethic is very good. He he's the type of player who would go through demos without anyone needing to ask him. He'll bring new things to practice. And not just that, but individually, he'll always try to find new things, like plays to make or how people like to hold an angle or people's reactions. And I think that's all a part of consistency as well because when you go through the research and all that, when you catch up the meta and like the angles that people hold, the setups that people like to do nowadays, and like how their reaction is, you're kind of in this situation where you're always knowing what can happen to you, and you won't get surprised. And it comes down to hitting the shot at the end of the day. Within a team game, if you look at Strauss, for example, Device is considered one of the best players in the world, and Glaive actually just got his first MVP medal. But we all know how impactful and important Glaive is for the team. But the team is set for Device to thrive too in certain situations, and everyone has their good roles. Everyone knows how to play all the roles, and they hold their own very well, and they're very reliable with each other. Can play off each other very well, and they react very fast too. I think there's a lot of things that will lead you to consistency. You just gotta find the right one.
Yeah, I remember when I asked Alicia this question on the podcast I did with him. He was talking about how he looks at it in terms of the A game, B game, and C game, and
Mhm.
making sure that his C game is extremely good and so on. Is that also something that's presumably I imagine this is something that all of you guys talk about on the team. So is that something you've internalized as well?
For myself, I haven't, but I remember having a meeting with our psychologist, and he was explaining that, but I never really utilized it too much.
Is it something you've been thinking about exploring? I know you said you want to kind of solve things in your own way.
I don't know. It's kind of hard because, like, right now at this moment, I feel so burnt from CS, and that's not a very valid excuse. Like that, I think that's what people can say, and I agree with that as well. But I don't want to be burnt out. I don't want to be not as motivated as I was when I first joined or when we were winning tournaments. But that's just how it is, right? Like that's a barrier that I have to fight through. And in order for me to find consistency, I'm gonna have to solve all these little things that are blocking me to get there. I'm still working pretty hard. I'm still trying my best, but sometimes when there's too much of something and you force yourself to do it, it's just gonna go the wrong way. And right now, that's how I'm kind of picturing it. And I'm trying to find time to get away from the game, but at the same time, still put in a lot of hours into the game.
Yeah, I think there is definitely kind of a weird perception sometimes about I think sometimes people look at it where they think that hours equals work ethic. And, as you say, I don't think it's always so simple as that because, your performance is going to be directly related to whether or not you're burnt out. And you can't exactly control when you're going to be burnt out or not. Like sometimes you'll probably have periods where you can go much harder than others. And sometimes you're going to be fatigued. And the worst thing you can do, as you say, is just to not kind of recognize that and try to push through it when your body's telling you otherwise. I think it's really interesting because if it was like if it's let's say like I don't know, martial art or something like that, some kind of physical competition, you get a pretty clear demonstration that you can't go any further. Your body's broken in some way. It's like it's much clearer.
Mhm.
But when it's kind of psychological and emotional, which is effectively like there's so much of Counter Strike is psychological, emotional, and so on. You can't visibly see that thing, so it's hard to know what's really going on.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
people focus, I think, too much on stuff like, well, they don't look at it in that way, I think, enough. And one thing too that people obsess over is statistics, and I think you mentioned it too. I think talking about consistency is difficult in Counter Strike because there's so many variables. Like you can have a game where you just get timed like on 5 or 6 of the main opportunities that you get to have massive impact in a half, let's say. So that must be pretty difficult to deal with as well, like the ups and downs emotionally of winning and losing and so on. So I'm kind of going on a tangent here. So I'm going to use this as a moment to pivot into my next question, which is more positive in terms of your performance. What were some of your biggest breakthroughs as a player, do you think, to become as good as you are?
I think it's just the drive that I have. I think that's mainly it because I joined Cloud9 as a rookie, but I had pretty good players that led me in the right direction. It was mainly Jordan. I'd say Stunner would be one in terms of maturity and guiding me on the right path. And I think when I was playing with Jordan, he had a lot of tolerance for me, and I was a young kid, so I made a lot of mistakes. But he was able to tolerate with me, and I can tell you there were probably countless amount of times where I would go up to him and apologize for this mistake or this reaction I did to him, and every single time he would still react the same way as if nothing happened. Like he's willing to drop everything and move on, even though it's becoming like a little repetitive. And I think he was like my punching bag, like I didn't realize it until the very end, like what he did to help me in that aspect. And you know, I I'm the type of player who would learn, or I'm the type of player who would observe and learn, and I would try to absorb as much as I can, and not just in the game, but what's important outside the game as well, in order to be a number one team in the world. And when I left to MIBR, I learned a lot from them as well, becoming a better person, growing up to be an adult, and also like going through a different culture and in game as well, like a different philosophy of the game, and you know actually giving it a chance, even if I thought it was the wrong way. Like if I thought I had a better way of doing it, I would still let them run their system if they listen to me or not. Like I could suggest it if they think it's wrong. I wouldn't argue. I would give them 100% to their system, and at the end it didn't work out, but I think it benefited me a lot in my career, and it made me more versatile and think about the game in many more ways.
So there's a couple of points I really want to touch on. One, you mentioned two things. One was the kind of Brazilian philosophy, and the other one was you were kind of talking about mentors, and you mentioned Stunner, and you mentioned Jordan or Nothing, for those that don't know him by Jordan. And so I want to talk about the mentors a little bit. Were there any other people that you consider mentors or people that have helped your development quite a lot, and what impact have they had?
There's a lot, but like they could not say anything or tell me anything, but I will still learn. Like Fallen, for example, I've never been on a team where a player doesn't negatively react ever, and Fallen was the first guy that I played with that does that. He never ever gets mad. He never shows that he's mad. He never reacts in a negative way. And the only time I ever saw him negative react was towards the other team in a match. But it was kind of funny. We were playing against North, and he stuck the bomb 10 seconds, and he says, "This is why you guys are 0-3 or something." But yeah, I think there's a lot of people that could have helped, but it's kind of hard to, run through the list right now.
All right. Well, again, we can move on to the next question. Talking about the philosophy of Counter Strike, the Brazilian style of Counter Strike, and how that was different. So, yeah, how was that transition for you going into that team? How would you describe the differences in the way that they played Counter Strike versus the way that you played Counter Strike before?
Yeah, so when I first joined them, I came in with a more open mind and, give their system a chance and how they want me to play a chance. But it was a little harder to start because when I first joined, it was almost like plug and play. Like they told me the roles that I wanted, and I was okay with the roles that they gave me as well. And I was willing to learn new spots if I wasn't there, right? And they pretty much don't tell me much. They would just tell me that I'm gonna play here and I'm gonna do this. And what they expect you to do is your default spot. You need to pretty much know what's gonna happen to you or what can happen to you and how you're gonna play around it. And like your main priority is to punish. Play safe. Gain ground when you're allowed to. And they're not the type of team who likes to really play like a puggy, like kind of like Fur. Like nowadays, if you watch Fur plays, he's pretty much the guy who makes a move, but you really don't see other players moving around as much. Like before KNG and Lucas joined, because KNG and Lucas they come from kind of like an NA play style. I wouldn't say they're similar to Fallen system, but when Fallen, Cold, Taco, Fur were still there, when they needed an aggressor, it was just Fur alone though. But if it's a set aggression, they're willing to do that. But they don't know how to play off of each other if it's a little uncoordinated. Well, that's how I felt at least. Maybe it could have been the communication, and yeah.
Well, in terms of that kind of style of play that they have, do you think that because obviously it didn't, as you mentioned, it didn't kind of end up working out with yourself and Tarek on the team having that mix with the Brazilians. But even now, they have an incredible amount of skill and experience on the team, but they're still kind of struggling to find their way into be consistently like top 4, top 8. So what do you think is kind of holding them back? Is it their system or?
I'd say a little bit. It's kind of hard to say because the game changes so fast and the meta just changes so fast nowadays that it's hard to say which system is good and which system is not. But when I was still on MIBR, I learned a lot from their system as well. There was a lot of goods that I took out of it, and I brought it to Liquid. When I first joined Liquid, I don't think they actually played Overpass too much, or they didn't think Overpass was one of their best maps. But I took everything that I learned from Fallen and Cold and everyone else on Overpass and pretty much just brought it to Liquid, and we tried to make it better. And I think that's when our Overpass actually started becoming number 1 in the world. So they definitely have a good system. Like they're very structured, and at the same time they know how to play off each other very well. Like you can see like a duo moving up and gaining ground while the others know exactly what to do, like whether it's to hold or not even move and when to go and when not to go. So like they like to play perfection. They like to play perfect CS, but it got to the point where it's kind of hard to play CS perfectly all the time in every situation. So I think they were expecting a little too much when sometimes the answer is right there in front of you. For example, if you get 2 entries, you just automatically go, right? Like you run up and you trade, you beat the rotate. But for them, that's not their first instinct. They think about getting the map control that you're still told to do, and after that, you wait for Fallen's call basically, unless a mistake happens from the other team.
That's really interesting because I've seen actually other Brazilian teams try that style and it's worked out kind of poorly for them. And it's interesting because it is, as you say, like there is that spot where you have this big advantage. As you say, you get the trade and you've got position and you've beaten the rotation. So now you have a positional advantage as well. And so it seems kind of a strange thing to kind of throw that away. Do you think, do you have confidence that they will get there? They just need more time, or do you think that it's not a good answer for the way that Counter Strike is played these days?
Well, after I left MIBR, honestly, the problem that I really thought they had was just forgetting about what they did in the past and like forgetting about not completely forgetting about like their actual system, but forget about what worked in the past. Because the meta doesn't it's not stale. Like it's always moving. So when I left, I thought that was their main problem. Like they need to give chances. Like they need to give. It's not that they didn't give me and Tarek a chance about what we're saying. It's just they didn't completely believe in it. Like they didn't completely make that a number one priority. And nowadays, I think when I left, all the way to Liquid to this up to today, I think their problem is that I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. Actually, I haven't been paying attention to them too much. You see a lot of questionable changes that they make, like Fallen dropping the op, giving it to KNG. I mean, KNG is a good opper, but Fallen was the top 5 players in the world in one of the years. So for him to drop the op there, it just shows a lack of confidence to me. Because if he was one of the best at one point, why give that up? And I think their system is getting a little stale because people are starting to play that same style. Like people know when they're holding. Like they can picture the enemies or MIBR on the radar pretty easily. At least that's how I feel when I was on Liquid and I was playing against MIBR. I felt like I knew exactly what they were doing. I knew like their pacing of the game, and yeah, I felt very comfortable. I didn't feel too much pressure. You know?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting point that you bring up about Fallen with the AWP, and because I know a lot of people have various opinions on him, and it's so easy, of course, to be really critical of Fallen and the AWP because, as you said, he was iconic. The kind of stuff that he was doing with it, like he just innovated the game so heavily with the AWP and so on. So it's definitely interesting to see the direction that they're going in now. But speaking of which, obviously, because I want to try to cover some of the backstory. That honestly, I could ask you so many questions. I've got so many notes, but and one of the things I want to ask you, zooming back in time and changing the topic a bit, is about when you first kind of came up onto the scene, because originally you kind of perceived to be just this expert pugger, and obviously, you so many memes were created of you just because of how annoying you were to play against in pugs. So obviously, though, at that point, people looked at you not as a pro but as a pugger, but obviously you were able to make that switch very quickly. You got the opportunity to join Cloud9, and immediately, you took to it like a duck to water. So what was it about going from pug star to being at the top level that worked out so well for you? Like, how are you able to make that transition so well?
Well, the way people were perceiving me, I wouldn't blame them for doing that because, that's how I grew as a player and that's where I came from. And to be honest, like I never had any experience playing in matches or leagues or anything like that. So the way they perceive me is the only way they can actually perceive me. So I mean, there's nothing I can do to defend myself, but that's how I grew as a player and that's my play style. That's where I came from, right? But at the same time, I always had the mentality where I always thought I was better than the next guy. Like when I finally got a spot in Money 10 Mans when we play against Days and Steel and like all these big names, all these pros that you see all the time. When I got comfortable, I actually thought that I was better than all of them. Like I actually thought I could get better than all of them. And I just had that type of mentality where I felt I was always better than the next guy. Like everyone that I played against and with in the NA scene, I felt like I was better. And including my teammates as well. Like when I joined Cloud9, that's how it was as well. But that's the competition in me. That's like the little inner competition. And after joining Cloud9, that's where I'm finally stepping into the pro scene. And I've never played any matches that matter on LAN or anything like that. So once I finally got into that environment where I'm learning how to play the game correctly, I start adapting to it and I just start becoming a sponge and I just start absorbing pretty much. If I die a way where I didn't feel like I got out aimed but actually outplayed, I would just pretty much just steal what he did. And that's actually pretty similar with Tim too when he came on Cloud9. We actually had pretty similar mentality within the game and we would always steal people's plays or like make them better or make them into a strat. And I think that's how it got me to where I am today.
It's an amazing storyline, I think, because especially because I feel like you were the first fresh face, like kind of first generation CS:GO player type deal, if you will. Because back
I didn't want
then,
to say it.
back then we had this situation where everyone was getting recycled. We had all these players which were just being recycled and recycled, and it does happen. And you can. There's definitely a lot of good arguments why people get recycled. It's the devil you know versus the devil you don't. This guy has experience and so on. The youngster, we don't know about him yet. If can he deal with the pressure and all the rest of it? And these days, people are definitely much more happy to pick up the younger players that don't have the experience, and we have more platforms to show those players, to find those players. People like the Obo and the Tenzes of the world, and obviously we've seen recently with a player like Tens, who mechanically is got a very high skill ceiling. That just didn't seem to work out with Cloud9. And I think players like yourself, players like Rops, some of these kind of first generation CS:GO players, I feel like you kind of put into that same category that the youngster that just got the opportunity and did really well. But it seems like it's not, you have to find the right people. Like you have to have like the right mental approach and the rest of it. And that's not something that, like at this point, we're seeing so many really strong mechanically gifted players. Do you think that Tens is going to need a lot of time to grow, for example, to transition into Team Counter-Strike? Because obviously it didn't work quite like it worked with you, where you're able to just kind of jump over, to make the transition and adapt pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, just looking from the outside in, it seems like Tens had tension within the team. He didn't believe their solution is the right solution. He believed that his solution was the right solution. But the thing is, when you're a young, not young, yeah, he's a young player, but also inexperienced player coming into an experienced team with experienced players, even though if they tell you what you think might not be right, you still give it a chance, right? Like you come in with an open mind and you're there to learn. You don't just talk back and, think that they're going against you or anything like that. So I think that's one thing that he might have messed up and it started limiting him because when you get to that point, you just start giving up and, you don't want to listen to your teammates anymore. You don't want to listen to what they have to say. And it's just bad tension within the team. And to be honest, when I got the chance, that's kind of how I went into it. I'm pretty open minded, and I was listening to what they had to say for me. But it got to a point where I listened so much that I compared it to what I was thinking, and a lot of times I was more right than not. So that's when I started speaking up and saying, I think we should do it my way or something. And the thing is, the way I looked at it is, I'm giving this once in a lifetime chance and I worked pretty hard for it. So, I might fail, I might not, but I'm gonna try my best. And at the end, if I tried my best and I have no regrets, whether I failed or not, then I can move on happy as long as I'm looking back and I tried it the hardest I can. Instead of you know Tenz's way, it kind of feels as if he didn't even get the chance to try his hardest, right? Like he didn't get that much. It felt like there was a lot of wasted time.
Yeah, I can definitely feel that. And speaking of happiness, do you feel, does it a weird feeling of looking at Cloud9 and since obviously you were on the team and were able to win the Boston Major, you won the Boston Major with them. Since then, obviously, it's been kind of a mess for the last 2 years. And is that a weird feeling for you, or have you just kind of like moved on from it? Obviously, you must have some kind of. I'm sure you'd love to see them do really well.
Well, when I first left, you know, I kind of questioned myself as well if I was really that key part of the team that I thought I really was. And, eventually as time went by, it kind of proved to me that, I was a big part of the team and they're not functioning the same, whether it's because, I'm not there or maybe the player that they got just didn't fit in. But it could go many ways. Maybe a player doesn't is not playing the same or is not as motivated anymore. So there could be other factors as well. But the competition side of me is happy to see them not do as well with me on their team. And, at the same time, later on, I started feeling bad for them. Like I don't want to see them completely fail. Those were my friends, those were my teammates that I played alongside with. So I don't want to completely see them fall apart. Right. So, the one player that I really feel bad for is Tim because I know he's a good worker. He's a great player as well. He has really good potential, but I felt like the recent years from it just felt like a waste for him because he couldn't really play to the best of his potential or be with a team that's actually functioning or staying together for a while.
Yeah, it seems like yeah, I think everybody kind of sees that. Like he's so good. You're someone that has done this international team thing. And if we look at MIBR, maybe not like a crazy level of like everyone's from a completely different place, but you know you've done the international thing, and obviously that's something that Cloud9 were experimenting with. A lot of teams are experimenting with it. Complexity is doing it right now with their new team. Do you think that obviously it's would it be ideal to have all five players from the same country, from the same culture? Like, you know, Astralis, you got five guys who, if they played forever together, they clearly like understand each other in a way that maybe if some of them are from different countries, maybe they wouldn't understand each other as well. Do you think that's a big deal, or do you think international teams, you know, it's that they can succeed? It's just about the players. It doesn't matter about the cultures they're from.
Yeah, I think they can definitely still succeed, but for my preference, I'd rather play with the people from my region. And I think it's more important because you got to find players that work in and outside of the game. And when you find an EU player, sometimes it's hard to, work with them outside the game too. Like maybe you guys don't vibe as well, and that could take a toll on your team in the future as well. At the end of the day, it's a business and it's your job nowadays. So you gotta really prioritize that and make it as efficient as possible. And I feel like if you bring in an EU player and you don't know too much about him, and if you don't know too much about him outside the game, it could affect a lot down the road.
Well, speaking of the international teams, and I mentioned complexity, how well do you think their new team's going to do?
It's kind of hard to say right now. We practiced against them a few times, and they seem to have a good structure. Like it makes sense the things they're doing, but at the same time, they're in a honeymoon phase. You know, everyone goes through that, so we just gotta let time go by and see how they do.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm really curious to see how that's going to work out. Especially considering how much money complexity is spent on putting that lineup together. It's going to be very interesting.
Hmm.
But yeah, moving on to some more Team Liquid stuff. Obviously, it took a while for you guys to kind of find the success together in the way that. Obviously, at the beginning of the year, you guys, I think, started off by actually winning a tournament. I think it was your debut tournament, the IBA Power Masters,
Oh
and
yeah,
you
yeah.
guys beat Astralis. Obviously, there was like an asterisk, kind of like a caveat to that result because it's the whole arena, the event. It was not
Not the
ideal.
best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but then obviously you guys, maybe like 4 or 5 months later, you really start to kind of peak together and you get that amazing run where you looked just like no one could touch you guys. No matter what happened, didn't matter. If there's a 1v3, like one of you guys, didn't matter which one was left alive, you'd always win it. It's just crazy stuff. Then of course the player break happens and you guys are kind of have been experiencing some problems since then. How is that going within the team? Do you think that it's an issue with your system because maybe you're leaning on everyone being so good individually, or is it something else?
Right now, it's kind of hard to say. I think it's just about being as a team and kind of a band of brothers and having that camaraderie and being a team when you need to be, right? Like for me, I don't think you need to be the best friends outside the game. You don't always have to hang out with each other or be together 24/7. But when the time comes for the matches and practice, you still need to be close with your teammates, like have that basically that band of brothers, right? And for us, before our player break, and after that tournament, we won against Astralis. When we won that tournament, all it told us was that we can beat Astralis, but how good we thought we were, the bar just raised higher, and we know we could do a lot of damage. And when I first joined this team, I wanted to not mess this up. Like I don't want to be looking back into my career on Liquid that I fucked up, So I came in with a pretty good plan and, from past experience from MRVR and Cloud9, thought about everything and just come in with a good game plan. And for me, after hearing what they said about their own problems from last year, I thought it was very important to keep us together outside the game. And when you have something to say, you have to say it, like making sure people are getting things off their chest and not building that tension up and building that bubble where it could get so big and burst and it's just hell all over the place.
It is like it's an interesting thing too because even though you guys aren't, let's say, number one in the world right now, You're still a top four
Mhm.
team, and I don't think you've dropped out of the top four for like. I don't think Team Liquid has dropped out the top four for like 18 months or something, like 16 months, like a really long time. That's actually insane. Like considering how many events there are and everything. Do you think that I guess the bar is just set so high, isn't it? I mean, if you're not winning tournaments, if do you guys feel disappointed if you're not winning the tournament? Because again, like you guys and Astralis are effectively still the most consistent teams over the last like 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, we were winning a lot back then, so when you set the bar that high, there's gonna be a bar that's way lower, right? And I think we're kind of like there already, but it's all about just going uphill from here. It's gonna be the same grind as if, we just beat Astralis at that first tournament. It's gonna be that same grind. You're gonna have to do that same amount of work, and I don't know. Right now, we're pretty disappointed that we're not winning in these tournaments. But the way we look at it is, if we lose and we get eliminated, we don't want to go over our match again and talk about losing to ourselves. Like where we need to snap out of it one round and just move on. Keep the communication still up the best it can be, to make your teammate better, to tell your teammate the right play. You got to keep the comms flowing, the environment, the energy, the intensity, all at a very high level. And when we were having that run, everything was at the highest level it can be. The environment was really good. If we lose a stupid round, we believe that we can still come back. But when you start losing, those things just skew a different direction, right? Like you don't start believing as much. You don't trust in your teammate as much, and it happens. But we got to realize that it's just going to be the same grind from the beginning. And we did it once with this team. We made history. We won 7 tournaments, and this is probably the best any team that we can make right now. So we got to believe that this roster can still do it. Like we can't give up.
How do you feel about the rivalry between you guys and EG? Because obviously
We're better.
EG is,
No, I'm just kidding.
because you two, as you say, like the two. Well, these are the two best North American teams without a question, and it's interesting to me because it feels like, from my perspective, I feel like EG is still kind of in that honeymoon phase. I don't know that they'll have a higher ceiling than Liquid will. And I don't think they have the depth of an Astralis or something like that. Personally, that's just how I feel about it. How do you guys feel about EG? And also, I also want to know your opinion on what makes Astralis so good, because obviously it feels like they are in a tier of Counter-Strike kind of their own a lot of the time.
hmm So about EG, they're our competition, so we'll say shit here and there. We would want them to lose, like they're our competition in our region, and we want to be the best in our region. So that's just the competition talking. But just looking at it from an unbiased situation or unbiased perspective, we know they're a good team, and we know they're definitely up there with us and Astralis. So we don't really underestimate them, but we know they're definitely one of the best teams in the world as well. And the way that I've been looking at it is exactly like you said. Like I don't think they raised the bar higher than we did. I don't think their ceiling is as high as it can be with ours. But I think they had these little small runs, but not long enough. And there's also inconsistency that's already showing for them. Like they just came off good wins. Like very important wins, like against Astralis, winning some tournaments. And nowadays they're showing a lot of inconsistency as well. So it could be just a part of the game because the competition is so high nowadays, or it could just be them getting burnt out as well. So I still think that if I look at it from an unbiased way, I still think we're above them. So the reason why I think Astralis is #1 team in the world is because, well, first of all, it's not about getting to #1. That's the hard part. It's about staying there, right? Or getting back to there. And they've done it countless amount of times now, probably for like 2 years. And it's very impressive because it's not as easy as people think it is to get back to #1 or even stay there for a long time. And for them, I think they're #1 because if you look at them outside the game, they're, as a five, you can tell they really enjoy being around each other. They might not, I don't know too much about them or what really happens, but I can tell that they're professional and they know that they need to do it and keep it healthy in order for them to succeed, and not just the team, right? Like the individual, if individual prioritizes to win and be number one, then he knows he needs to keep the environment healthy and the relationships with the teammates healthy, right? And I'm pretty sure they're very good at talking with each other, probably, as in, you know, there's some problems that you just can't say to your teammates sometimes, or it's a problem that you need to really be sensitive about and take your time to fix it, right? Because they might take it a little too personal, or they might not think the same way, and it might cause extra tension within the team that's unnecessary. So you really want to take it sensitively. And I'm pretty sure they're good at talking about those problems and dealing with them because they're always pretty happy around each other. But actually, there was this one point where I think they were getting a lot of trash talk from the community about, being Blastralis, skipping tournaments, and they lost like Fury or something, and people were giving them a lot of backlash for it. And you can tell actually on their faces that they're really not enjoying playing there, and they're not enjoying being around each other. But a few months later, you just see them clicking again, like as if nothing happened. The number one team in the world, they're vibing together really well, and that leads to in-game too. Like when you're having a good time with your teammates and keeping it healthy, it's just gonna lead into the game healthier as well. It's gonna make you guys play the best you can. And I don't think it's just that as well. Like inside the game, they're very structured, and the roles that they put each other in make sense, and each individual does it pretty well. Like Device, I think that's why Device is so consistently good with his op, because it's kind of built around him, as in he's always in the most comfortable spot he wants to be in, and he has the freedom too. Like if he wants to do something crazy, like he'll do it. And Glaive is that guy who really sets them up, right? Like he's not afraid to go in. He's not afraid to, die for someone because he needs to do it. He's not afraid to gain ground with no fear if he needs to do it. And he just runs in like a crazy guy. And I've seen him done it many times. And then you got, people supporting him pretty well, like Zimnix getting the trades all the time, and Magus is a pretty good fragger too. And they're on the same page a lot of times. And I think that's why, they're number one, because they're like five minds of one. And also outside the game, they know how to be professional, and they know how to work basically.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting. When we talk about coaches as well, we actually really haven't mentioned coaches at all so far in the podcast, but I can sneak it in here right now and mention Adren, because if you look at some of the other super high profile teams, I feel like we get to see and hear and look at their coaches a little bit more. Obviously, Zonic obviously is a huge profile. Zeus, when he was doing work for Team Liquid, was a really big personality, and absolutely kind of the leader of men of the team. You could really see him doing all this lifting in terms of the energy of the team and otherwise. And Adrena's definitely a bit more behind the scenes, in the sense that of course he's there with you guys, but he's not doesn't have that quite that same role, and it seems like he kind of stays out of the spotlight a little bit more outside of the game. So what is it like in terms of Adren and the advantages that you think that he provides for the team and working with him?
Just comparing him with Zeus a little bit, I never really played with Zeus or been on a team with him, but I've hung around him many times, so I kind of know how he is. And we talk about the game as well, so I know his perspective as well, the way he looks into the game, and we talk about his time on Liquid together as well. But for me individually, thinking about this team as a whole, it's very important to keep the intensity and the hype high, but at the same time, knowing these guys, they would like a helping hand. They would like someone to do that for them, and lift them off their feet to do it, right? And when we're having a run, you see people like Twist doing it. You see Elise shouting. And nowadays, when I go into this situation where I'm so burnt and I have so many problems in front of me that I kind of need a helping hand, right? And it's kind of hard to find a helping hand when there's no one there to do it. When I was the guy who was doing it, now I need someone to do it for me, but there's no one there, right? So I'm pretty sure with a guy like Zeus as a coach, or Zonic, for someone to be there to do that, it could actually boost the morale way higher. And I feel like morale is so important within the team that it just makes people play better. It makes their confidence way higher. They get hyped. And when you're hyped and the intensity is there, you get into the zone where you're so focused on your monitor, right? Like there's like your surroundings don't even matter anymore. It's all about like your team and the game, and just caring about the win, right? You're not caring about the mistakes. You're not harping on the mistakes. You're moving on to the next round. So I'm pretty sure having a guy like that as a coach is pretty good too. But Adren, I'd say he's the opposite of Zeus a bit. I think he's very quiet, like you said. He doesn't really yell or anything like that. He doesn't get too hyped, but he helps the team a lot. As in, he gets the train to start going. We would come to practice. He would instantly say, "Okay, let's watch a demo. Let's watch our practice that we recorded together. What do you guys think we could have done better here? I think we should clean up our anti-egos, or I think we should find a better way to make this execution better, or a better way to pick them off one by one, right?" So he's always coming to practice with a plan and making sure we're not just sitting there doing absolutely nothing, right? And it's funny because I think it's better to have a coach like this, Adren specifically, because he's also played the game at a high level at one point. So he knows a lot. And when you have a player who becomes a coach like that, you can fully trust and rely on him to find the correct answers. As in, if he goes to a demo, he knows what to look for. He the right answers. He knows like the different situations. You don't really have to explain to him or have this thought that it's kind of hard to explain. But I've had coaches in the past where they would try to bring something new that they saw was unique, but it's pretty useless. Like it's almost like you can't use it. But
Yeah,
like Adren's not like that. He knows what's useless and what's useful and what we can steal and what we can't.
that's awesome. And I actually remember, like, speaking of him being able to play the high level and stuff like that. I remember, I think it was one of the ECS online games. I remember we were casting it, and he had to stand
Oh
in.
yeah, yeah.
I forget who was missing, but
TK.
yeah, dude, he can frag. I can tell he's been playing some pugs.
Yeah, I was pretty
He can
surprised
still
too.
frag, man.
I was pretty surprised too. It's good though. It's good that he still has it.
And being sensitive of your time as we're kind of coming up in the hour, I wanted to squeeze in some fan questions, as I kind of made a tweet out, and I put a tweet out there asking fans if they want to submit any questions, and we got a few. Okay. So we have one from actually a friend of mine. So this is maybe nepotism, but Taylor Johnson. He asked, looking back on your career, what are 1 to 3 key tips that you'd give yourself, your present self to your past self? What are some tips you'd give yourself when, if you look back to when you were starting out?
It's kind of hard to say. I mean, there's just so many things, but I can't really think of any specific ones that I would give to myself in the past. I mean,
I feel like kind of everything worked out in the way that it had to, I guess.
well, it's just I don't know. It's kind of hard to find like a answer for that. I feel there's so much, right? Like I don't know what's the best it can be, and I don't know. I guess don't change my resolution ever.
It honestly, it is a really difficult one. I think some of the stuff that you're talking about before, this is a side point, but I think it's part of the reason, one of the reasons why I love like competitive video games like esports and stuff like that. It's such like a self-improvement project, because you were talking about this earlier. You were saying how you like to solve the problems as they come up. You're always trying to see where the issues are. The game's like telling you
Something's wrong.
there's something,
What's wrong?
your shit's fucked up. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's so fun. And so like if you were to go back and give yourself these tips, I feel like you're kind of cheating the process anyway. So so the next question is from Les. And Les asks, how do you feel about your current role on TeamLiquid, and are you eager for a nerf to the SG? And do you think that the nerf will sway the meta back into TeamLiquid's favor if the nerf happens?
Can you repeat the first part? Something about my role on Liquid.
Yeah. How do you feel about your current role on Liquid?
I mean, just being honest, I feel like there's a lot on my plate and a lot of weight in terms of keeping the environment the best it can be, as in keeping it hyped. Bring some intensity to practice, or keeping the intensity high when it matters on land matches, and keeping people zoned in. Giving them that no fear type of feeling. And there's a lot more to it. It's not just inside the game. The role, I feel like roles in the game anyone can do, but some people might do it better. But a lot of people know how to do every role, and it just comes down to playing it right. But I don't know. It's kind of hard to talk about my specific role, but I feel like I have to like environment's a really big thing for me.
Gotcha. Well, Kieran asks, did coming from Follow Esports / SKDC straight to one of North America's leading organizations in Cloud9 affect you at all? Considering that when that you had a negative reputation at the time, it was likely tough starting out?
Not really. Just transitioning to Cloud9, a prestigious org and a very top team at the time, and I'm replacing someone like Sean Gears, who's considered NA's IGL, NA's best IGL. But I'm coming in to fill in big shoes, and I'm a rookie. No one knows anything about me, and I get a lot of hate for it. But in that specific moment, I actually really like the pressure because I felt like it's pushing me to do it. I want to prove these guys wrong, and they don't, and say that they don't know anything about me, right? And just kind of have that good feeling at the end when you prove them wrong, really.
All right. And the last question we have Ian, and he asks, how has your approach to individual preparation out of the game changed as your career has developed?
I'm not gonna lie to you. It gets more simple and simple. For example, back on the Cloud9 days when I was still playing with Jordan, Scott, Freakazoid, that type of line, I would whenever we get to LAN, I would DM as soon as I set up, and I would DM until maybe like 15 minutes before the match just to chill out, and I would just play until it comes match time basically. But as time went on, like nowadays, you can only DM so much because on my downtime, I don't even really DM that much. I think DM is just about, warming up your muscle memory and, just getting you ready. The longer you DM, it's not going to really help you that much, I feel. So nowadays, I pretty much just, watch my opponent and, see their tendencies and see what kind of strats they have. And when I go set up to a LAN, I just sit down, make sure I feel comfortable, set everything up. And I'll probably play DM for like 10, 15 minutes. And, that's pretty much it.
Actually reminded me of something Valde said, because when I did a podcast with him a long time ago, and he was saying how he doesn't like, what his preference is he likes to just watch whatever game's happening. Like, let's say he's about to play in an hour or something like that, and he would prefer to watch whatever game's happening right now and just maybe just visualize the plays that he's going to make in the game and this, that, and the other. He was saying how he didn't like to sit down and DM or anything like that, like a lot of people do as well.
Yeah. I don't really like sitting down DMing that long either. And I think it goes for many pro players. Like I know NAF doesn't really do much either. But the difference is Twist is DMing all the time. And that's probably why his aim is so good, or he's just God's gift. But he DMs a long time, Nitro DMs a long time. I know John likes to get a certain amount of DM in and feel comfortable. But for me, as long as I sit down and feel comfortable, DM a little bit, I think I'll feel good after.
Awesome. Well, I have one bonus question, which is just from myself, and it's a quick one. I really want to know if, do you think Skadoodle will ever come back to Pro Counter-Strike?
Man, that's hard to say, but when I actually look at him nowadays, I feel like he actually misses Counter-Strike. Seeing it from the outside now, I feel like Counter-Strike's his actual home, and he just wanted to get away from it for a while.
Makes sense. All right. Well, thank you so much for giving me your time, Stu. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks so much.
No problem. Glad to be here.
Thank you guys for listening. I hope you loved the podcast today. If you'd like to support the podcast, then you can do so by liking, by sharing with your friends, by leaving me reviews on whatever platform you listened on, and by generally spreading the words. Now, if you'd like to go a step further and support the podcast financially, you can do that too. Just head over to patreon.com/DDK Esports. Thank you very much. I look forward to making the next one for you. Cheers.